September 15, 2025, Russia's most advanced nuclear defense system, the S-500 Prometheus, worth over $2 billion, was about to face its greatest test. At exactly 3:17 a.m., 85 homemade Ukrainian drones, each costing less than $2,500, approached the heavily fortified Kursk 7 nuclear facility. What happened next would rewrite the rules of modern warfare and leave the world questioning everything they thought they knew about military supremacy. If you want to witness how ingenuity defeated arrogance, hit that subscribe button and join over 2 million viewers who never miss our military analysis. The Kursk 7 facility housed Russia's most classified nuclear research, protected by what Moscow called an impenetrable shield. The S-500 Prometheus system could allegedly detect and destroy any aerial threat within a 600-kilometer radius. Its sophisticated radar network, quantum-encrypted targeting computers, and hypersonic interceptor missiles represented the pinnacle of Russian military technology. For 3 years, no enemy aircraft had even approached within 200 kilometers without being obliterated. But that morning, something unprecedented occurred. Ukrainian intelligence had spent 6 weeks studying satellite imagery, intercepted communications, and leaked technical specifications. They discovered a critical flaw. The S-500 system, designed to counter advanced military aircraft and ballistic missiles, had one blind spot. It struggled to differentiate between small, slow-moving objects and natural phenomena like migrating birds. Operation Silent Thunder was born from this discovery. Under the command of Colonel Andrei Kovalenko, Ukraine's 47th Electronic Warfare Unit developed a swarm attack using modified civilian drones. Each drone carried a 3-kilogram explosive payload and flew at just 40 meters altitude, mimicking the flight patterns of wild geese. The drones were programmed with GPS coordinates, but operated without real-time control signals that radar could detect. At 2:45 a.m., the drone swarm launched from concealed positions near Sumy, just 78 kilometers from the Russian border. They flew in a V formation, maintaining speeds of only 65 kilometers per hour. To Russian radar operators monitoring their screens, the approaching blips looked exactly like a large flock of migrating birds, a common sight in the region during autumn. The first warning came too late. At 3:14 a.m., a Russian perimeter guard noticed unusual engine sounds, but by then, the drones were already past the outer detection grid. The S-500 system's AI algorithms had classified the incoming objects as wildlife and ignored them completely. Within minutes, 73 of the 85 drones penetrated the facility's airspace undetected. The attack was surgical and devastating. 12 drones targeted the main reactor cooling systems, causing massive steam explosions that disabled primary power. 23 drones struck the command bunker, severing all communications with Moscow. The remaining 38 drones hit fuel storage tanks, creating fireballs visible from space. The explosions were so intense that seismographs in neighboring countries registered the impact as a 2.7 magnitude earthquake. What made the attack even more shocking was its cost-effectiveness. Ukraine's entire operation cost approximately $127,000, including drone construction, planning, and execution. In contrast, Russia's $2 billion defense system had been neutralized in under 8 minutes. The psychological impact was immediate and profound. Within hours, leaked satellite imagery showed the Kursk 7 facility engulfed in flames. Initial Russian damage assessments, classified but later intercepted by Western intelligence, revealed catastrophic losses. Over $400 million in infrastructure destroyed, 3 experimental reactors offline, and most critically, the facility's entire research database compromised. Ukrainian cyber units had infiltrated the damaged computer systems during the chaos, extracting years of classified nuclear research. Moscow's response was unprecedented silence. For 18 hours, no official statement emerged from the Kremlin. Behind closed doors, a crisis meeting involving President Putin, Defense Minister Shoigu, and the entire nuclear command structure tried to comprehend how their most sophisticated defense system had failed against what amounted to hobby-grade aircraft. The international community watched in stunned disbelief. NATO immediately elevated its defense readiness across Eastern European bases. China quietly began reassessing its own nuclear facility protections. Israel placed its Iron Dome systems on maximum alert, fearing similar low-tech attacks. Global defense contractors saw their stock prices plummet as investors questioned the effectiveness of expensive military systems against asymmetric threats. But perhaps the most profound impact came from within Russia's military establishment. 3 S-500 system commanders were placed under investigation. 7 nuclear facility directors were quietly replaced. The entire doctrine of nuclear deterrence through technological superiority suddenly seemed vulnerable to a teenager with a laptop and spare electronics. The engineer behind the drone design was 23-year-old Maxim Petrenko, a computer science student from Kyiv whose family had been killed in earlier Russian bombing raids. Working from his university's basement laboratory, Petrenko had modified commercial quadcopters with open-source flight software and improvised explosive devices. His innovation wasn't advanced technology, but rather the brilliant simplicity of exploiting an enemy's assumptions. As dawn broke over the smoking ruins of Kursk 7, the world had witnessed more than just a successful military strike. Ukraine had demonstrated that in modern warfare, creativity trumps cost, strategy defeats strength, and sometimes the most sophisticated systems can be undone by the most basic human ingenuity. The wreckage at Kursk 7 was still smoldering when Ukraine unleashed the second phase of Operation Silent Thunder. What the world didn't know was that the drone attack had been just the opening move in a far more sophisticated strategy designed to cripple Russia's nuclear command structure across 3 regions simultaneously. At 4:23 a.m., while Russian emergency teams scrambled to contain the fires at Kursk 7, a second wave of 127 Ukrainian drones lifted off from hidden launch sites near Kharkiv and Poltava. But these weren't the same crude modifications used in the first strike. Ukraine's military engineers had spent the previous month reverse engineering captured Russian jamming equipment, creating drones capable of mimicking Russian military transponder signals. The genius of Ukraine's plan lay in its psychological warfare component. Russian radar operators, already traumatized by the complete failure of their systems hours earlier, were now seeing what appeared to be their own aircraft returning to base. The drone swarm had been programmed to broadcast emergency codes typically used by damaged Russian fighters requesting immediate landing clearance. Colonel Kovalenko's team had anticipated Moscow's predictable response. Within 2 hours of the Kursk 7 attack, Russia had deployed emergency S-400 batteries to protect 2 additional nuclear facilities, Smolensk 2 and the classified Belgorod 15 weapons storage complex. These hastily positioned systems created gaps in the overall defense network, exactly what Ukrainian intelligence had calculated. The second-wave drones exploited these gaps with surgical precision. 43 drones targeted Smolensk 2's newly installed backup generators, knowing that the facility's primary power grid had been deliberately overloaded to support the rushed S-400 deployment. When the generators exploded, the entire complex lost power for 17 critical minutes, enough time for Ukrainian cyber warfare specialists to penetrate the darkened facility's computer networks remotely. Meanwhile, 84 drones approached Belgorod 15 from 6 different vectors, overwhelming the hastily deployed S-400 system that had been calibrated for high-altitude threats. The attack formation split into 3 distinct groups. The first group, 28 drones carrying electronic warfare payloads, jammed local communications. The second group, 31 drones with high explosive charges, struck the facility's ammunition bunkers. The third group, 25 drones equipped with armor-piercing warheads, penetrated the underground command center. But the most devastating blow came from an unexpected source. Hidden among the wreckage of the first group of drones at Kursk 7, Ukrainian special forces had planted sophisticated listening devices during the chaos of the rescue operations. These devices, disguised as debris, transmitted real-time intelligence about Russian response protocols directly to Ukrainian military headquarters. Like, subscribe and tell me which country will be next to underestimate Ukraine's military ingenuity. The intelligence breakthrough came when intercepts revealed that Russia's nuclear facilities shared a centralized early warning system based in Moscow. Ukrainian hackers, using data stolen from Kursk 7's compromised computers, infiltrated this network and began feeding false information. For 47 minutes, Russian nuclear commanders believed they were under attack from NATO forces, causing them to scatter defensive assets across hundreds of potential targets. The psychological impact was immediate and catastrophic. Russian nuclear submarine commanders in the Baltic Sea received contradictory orders. Fighter pilots were scrambled to intercept non-existent threats. Mobile missile launchers were repositioned based on fabricated intelligence, leaving actual nuclear facilities temporarily undefended. During this window of confusion, Ukraine struck again. A third wave of 62 drones, launched from positions inside Belarus by pro-Ukrainian partisans, targeted the Bryansk Nuclear Research Center. This facility housed Russia's most advanced centrifuge technology for weapons-grade uranium enrichment. The attack was timed to coincide with a shift change, minimizing casualties while maximizing damage to irreplaceable equipment. The Bryansk strike revealed another Ukrainian innovation. These drones carried thermite charges specifically designed to melt through reinforced concrete and steel. The resulting fires burned at over 2,500 degrees Celsius, hot enough to destroy sensitive laboratory equipment and render entire sections of the facility unusable for years. What shocked Western intelligence analysts wasn't just the tactical success, but the strategic implications. Ukraine had effectively demonstrated that nuclear deterrence based on facility protection was obsolete. A single computer science student with $200,000 in commercial equipment had neutralized billions of dollars in Russian defensive systems. The human cost remained remarkably low, a deliberate choice by Ukrainian planners. Total Russian casualties across all three facilities numbered fewer than 40, mostly security personnel and emergency responders. This restraint wasn't accidental. Colonel Kovalenko had insisted that Operation Silent Thunder avoid targeting civilian areas or causing radioactive contamination. The goal was to humiliate Russia's military capabilities, not create an environmental disaster. By dawn on September 16th, Russia's nuclear defense network lay in ruins. 3 major facilities offline, defensive systems compromised, and most critically, the command and control structure reduced to chaos. Emergency protocols designed for nuclear warfare had been triggered by what amounted to a sophisticated prank involving hobby drones and university-level programming. The economic implications were staggering. Global uranium prices spiked 23%, as markets realized that nuclear facilities worldwide were vulnerable to similar attacks. Defense contractors began emergency reviews of their protection systems. The entire concept of nuclear security through technological superiority had been shattered by creativity and determination. In Moscow, the silence stretched into a second day. Behind the scenes, a complete restructuring of Russia's nuclear command was underway. 7 generals were dismissed. Entire defensive protocols were being rewritten. The psychological damage to Russian military confidence would take years to repair. But perhaps the most significant victory was yet to come. Hidden among the stolen data from all three facilities was something unprecedented. Complete blueprints for Russia's next-generation nuclear warheads, classified research on hypersonic delivery systems, and most valuable of all, the personal communications of senior Russian nuclear scientists expressing doubts about their own government's competence. Ukraine hadn't just won a military victory. They had delivered an intelligence coup that would reshape the global balance of power for decades to come. The aftermath of Operation Silent Thunder left the Kremlin in a state of unprecedented turmoil. For over 18 hours, there was no official response from Moscow, and this silence spoke volumes about the chaos erupting behind the scenes. Emergency sessions of the Security Council convened around the clock, with President Putin himself presiding over heated discussions about how Ukraine's homemade drones had penetrated what was supposedly the world's most advanced nuclear defense system. The psychological impact on Russia's military leadership was catastrophic. Classified internal reports, later leaked to Western intelligence agencies, revealed a complete crisis of confidence among senior commanders. General Viktor Gerasimov, chief of the General Staff, reportedly suffered a nervous breakdown during a briefing when presented with footage of Ukrainian drones casually flying past billion-dollar radar systems. The failure wasn't just tactical, it was existential. Within 72 hours, Moscow quietly initiated Protocol Red Shield, a classified emergency procedure for completely restructuring nuclear facility defenses. The program's estimated cost, over $40 billion, nearly 20 times what Ukraine had spent on their entire operation. The irony was not lost on international observers. Russia was now forced to spend astronomical sums to counter threats costing less than a luxury car. Internationally, the shockwaves reverberated through every major capital. NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg called an emergency meeting of the North Atlantic Council, the first time Article 4 consultations had been triggered by a non-member state's military action. The unprecedented nature of Ukraine's success had fundamentally altered threat assessments across the alliance. China's response was particularly telling. Within days of the attacks, satellite imagery revealed massive defensive upgrades around the Lop Nur nuclear testing facility. Beijing had quietly accelerated its drone countermeasure programs, allocating an emergency $12 billion for asymmetric threat defense. The message was clear: if Ukraine could humiliate Russia's nuclear shields, what could they do to China's facilities? Israel's reaction was equally swift and dramatic. Prime Minister Netanyahu authorized the deployment of advanced iron beam laser systems around the Dimona nuclear reactor, despite the technology still being in testing phases. Israeli defense officials privately admitted that Ukraine's tactics represented their worst nightmare: precision strikes that bypassed traditional defense layers through sheer creativity rather than overwhelming firepower. The global defense industry faced an existential crisis. Stock prices for traditional weapons manufacturers plummeted, while cybersecurity and counter-drone companies saw unprecedented surges. Raytheon's stock dropped 18% in the week following the attacks, while small-scale drone detection firms saw valuations triple overnight. The entire paradigm of military procurement was shifting beneath their feet. But behind Ukraine's tactical brilliance lay a profoundly human story. Maxim Petrenko, the 23-year-old computer science student who had masterminded the drone swarm, became an unlikely symbol of resistance. In a rare interview conducted from a secure location, Petrenko revealed that his motivation wasn't military glory, but personal tragedy. His younger sister had been killed in a Russian missile strike on a Kyiv apartment building 6 months earlier. "I didn't want revenge," Petrenko explained, his voice steady despite the weight of his words. "I wanted to prove that you don't need to be a superpower to defend your home. You just need to be smarter than your enemy thinks you are." The interview revealed fascinating details about Ukraine's grassroots military innovation. The drone swarm had been developed not in a high-tech military facility, but in the basement of Kyiv Technical University. Student volunteers had worked in 12-hour shifts, using 3D printers and salvaged electronics to create weapons that would change warfare forever. The total development time, 6 weeks. The total cost, less than what Russia spent on a single S-500 missile. American military analysts were unanimous in their assessment. Retired General David Petraeus called Operation Silent Thunder the most significant tactical innovation since the invention of gunpowder. The Pentagon immediately classified the attacks as a Level 5 strategic game-changer, the highest rating reserved for developments that fundamentally alter the nature of warfare. The ripple effects reached far beyond military circles. Universities worldwide began receiving massive funding increases for engineering and computer science programs. Governments recognized that the next generation of military advantages would come not from defense contractors, but from creative minds working with limited resources. The democratization of warfare had begun. In Russia, the human cost of military failure became increasingly apparent. 7 nuclear facility commanders were quietly arrested on charges of negligence. The psychological trauma among Russian nuclear personnel was so severe that over 200 technicians and engineers requested transfers to non-military positions. Morale within Russia's strategic forces had collapsed completely. Moscow's attempts to control the narrative failed spectacularly. Despite comprehensive media censorship, footage of the burning facilities spread through encrypted messaging apps and underground networks. Russian citizens began questioning not just their military's competence, but the entire foundation of their nuclear deterrent. If teenagers with hobby drones could penetrate their most secure facilities, what protection did ordinary Russians have? The global implications extended far beyond military strategy. Nuclear proliferation experts warned that Ukraine's success had fundamentally undermined the concept of nuclear security through technological superiority. If small-scale, low-cost attacks could neutralize billion-dollar defense systems, the entire calculus of nuclear deterrence needed urgent reassessment. Economic analysts predicted a complete restructuring of global defense spending. Traditional arms races focused on increasingly expensive systems would give way to competitions in innovation, creativity, and adaptability. The age of asymmetric warfare had truly begun, and Ukraine had written its opening chapter. As smoke continued rising from the damaged Russian facilities weeks later, one truth became undeniably clear. The future of warfare belonged not to those who could build the most expensive weapons, but to those creative enough to find their weaknesses. Ukraine had reminded the world that in conflict, as in life, intelligence ultimately trumps resources. If this analysis opened your eyes to the changing nature of modern warfare, please subscribe and share this content. Your support helps us continue bringing you the most comprehensive military insights available. The stories of courage and innovation deserve to be told, and your engagement keeps them alive.